What should Israel have done after October 7th? That is the one question that pro-Palestine, anti-Israel advocates can never answer. And I want you to check out this clip of Norman Finkelstein on the Trigonometry podcast getting grilled about this. And he doesn't have an answer. It takes him 15 minutes of this, that, no, yeah, and then it just no answer. He pretends to have an answer, but then doesn't answer the question. Check it out.
This is a difficult question to ask, but I feel that it needs to be said.
Mm-hmm.
The events of October the 7th were vile, awful, and you cannot justify that in any shape or form. Not to say that you are, I'm just saying that we both agree on that. What should Israel have done afterwards? Because we look at what's happened at Gaza, but what Hamas did was an act of war, and it was barbaric. And Israel had to retaliate in some shape or form. So I guess my question to you is, if you were Benjamin Netanyahu, what would you have done?
I am not going to evade questions.
Yeah.
So do not take what I'm about to say as a diversion. And you're absolutely free to press me and press me and press me. But I do have to convey how I see the question.
Of course.
Your question to me has to be preceded by what I would call an antecedent question, which is...
So I'm not going to evade the question, but here's another question that you should be asking, and I'm not actually going to answer the original question at all. So basically, I am going to evade the question.
Is what did you expect the people of Gaza to do? What do I mean by that? So,
well, look, let's not get into that for this reason, because in terms of having this discussion, let's accept when we had Bassem on, for example, this was the nature of the debate we had, right? He was saying, well, what do you expect the Palestinians to do? And I said, let's accept that while they're uprising, as Francis said, you called it, I think, a prison outbreak. Let's accept concentration camp outbreak. Let's say that that's what it is. Nonetheless, the fact is that Israel exists. Israel was attacked in this barbaric way. Let's say that the Palestinians have every cause to try and free themselves in this way. I don't know how killing and raping civilians does that, but let's set that aside. That still leaves the question of what should Israel do in this situation? It still leaves that question on the table. So let's say, without going into the detail, just for time reasons, that we accept everything you say about the suffering of the Palestinian people. Nonetheless, on top of that, what should Israel do in this situation?
I have pondered that question.
Okay.
And I recognize that to say they should have done nothing except to end the illegal and inhuman blockade of Gaza, which Richard Goldstone described.
So he's hinting at the fact that Israel, after October 7th, on October 8th, should have said, these people massacred us, they raped us, they tried to eliminate us. Now it's time to give them more land. Oh, you massacred my people, now I'm going to give you land. Oh, you massacred my people, now I'm going to reward you with a Palestinian state. Just insane.
Described as elements of a crime against humanity to immure 2 million people, half of whom are children, in what Israel's head of the National Security Council, Giora Eiland, described as, quote, a huge concentration camp.
Notice how he speaks very slowly to put you to sleep. Like I want to shoot myself every time I listen to this guy.
The Secretary General of the
no, let's say we accept all of this, just for the sake of argument. Let's say we accept all of this.
I recognize that question.
Okay. So what's the answer?
My answer is, first of all, on one level, it's a little late in the day to be asking that question. But asking it you can still make the argument that whatever Israel did, whatever was done to Israel, whatever was done to Israel. If you, for example, look at the South Africa application, it begins by saying what happened on October 7th was horrible, awful, terrible, so on and so forth. It said, and I'm quoting it, paraphrasing, whatever was done to Israel on October 7th, nothing whatsoever could justify a genocide.
We can talk about that separately, but what should they have done?
I don't think it's so easy.
That's not answering my question. That's the only reason I'm interrupting you. As I think you've observed, we're fair interviewers. We've given you lots of time to answer questions. So my question is, what you've described about what's happening in Gaza, what you've described about happening in Gaza prior to October 7th, let's, for the sake of argument, let's just say that that's all the case.
I agree with you. I think that's a fair question.
So do I.
I've wrestled with that question.
So what should Israel have done?
I would say that I'm not trying to divert. There's two concepts in international law, jus ad bellum and jus in bello. Jus ad bellum basically means who's the aggressor, who's the defender, okay? That's jus ad bellum. Jus in bello is how you conduct the war. And you have to conduct the war according to what we call IHL, International Humanitarian Law, the laws of war. That's conducting. I would say if Israel's, I'm not going to say which side is right and which side is wrong. That's jus ad bellum. I'm not going to discuss it. Jus in bello, I would say if you're going to carry out a war, even if it's a war of aggression, let's say you believe Russia's engaged in a war of aggression against Ukraine, it's still bound by the laws of war. And even if Ukraine is defending itself, it too is bound by the laws of war. So I will say I'm going to separate out the question of who's right and who's wrong.
Yes.
And I'll simply focus on then the laws of war. And I would say whatever Israel does, whether it's right or wrong, it still has to obey the laws of war. But Israel is carrying out what, in my opinion, what the International Court of Justice described as a plausible genocide.
So just so I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, are you saying that what Israel should have done is retaliated and destroyed the organization that attacked Israel?
No, I'm not saying
You're
that.
not saying that?
No.
So what should they have done?
I said if they choose to engage in
then they
war,
should follow the rules of war.
then they have to follow the laws
But what
of war.
should they have retaliated? Should they have attempted to take out Hamas? Should they be trying to kill the people who attacked their people?
I would say I cannot accept those judgments, the ones you just rendered. I understand they're not necessarily your judgments, but you're telling me.
Yeah.
Should they have? No, I can't accept those judgments because it's like, for me, I'll just give you the closest analogy I can. When the events of October 7 happened, the first day, it was unclear exactly the magnitude of what had occurred. The numbers were being given where 50 Israelis were killed. It wasn't clear if they were combatants.
By the way, to make it clear, this man is an absolute scumbag. He wrote on October 7th, it joys my heart to see the children of Gaza rising up against their oppressor Jews. So this guy was celebrating October 7th. So pretending like he cares now and it's like, oh, it was terrible. Like, no, you celebrated it on October 7th. You had somebody write out a tweet how great it was. And really shouldn't be able to be on any big podcast after that.
So civilians. And it was only about, you would say about the third or fourth day, it was clear that a crime of significant magnitude had occurred. Atrocities of a very significant magnitude had occurred. By now, the figure is about 850 civilians were killed. That's a significant crime by any standard. There's no question in my mind about that. Even if you allow for collateral damage and this and that, no, there's something very substantial that occurred there. And then I had to ask myself exactly the question you asked. You know, what should Israel have done and how do you allocate, so to speak, more responsibility? Let's leave the legal question aside, more responsibility. And after thinking about it very hard, the answer, what resonated for me, what seemed right for me, was to see it in the terms for myself as an American, in terms of the slave rebellions. And if you look at, for example, the Nat Turner rebellion in 1831 in the United States, if you look at the details, it was very ugly. You know, Nat Turner, he gave the order to his Confederates, kill all whites. That was the order, okay? And they went from house to house, and unlike in Gaza, they did behead babies. They took out an axe, chopped off the head of babies, cracked skulls, killed about 61 whites. The rebellion was repressed very quickly. And once I felt that seemed like a fairly reasonable analogy, then the question for me became, how did the abolitionists, those who oppose slavery, how did they react to Nat Turner's rebellion? And it was very striking to me when I read, for example, the editorial by William Lloyd Garrison, who was one of the famous abolitionists in our country, where he wrote an article in the periodical of the abolitionists called The Liberator. And he began by saying, and this I think is responsive to your question, he began by saying, we told you so, we the abolitionists, we told you so, we told you so. And he said, we told you, if you demean these people, degrade these people, humiliate these people, exploit these people, rape these people, if you do that, then what happened with Nat Turner was inevitable. And then
But we
He just openly said that October 7th was like, yeah, that was inevitable. You know, totally makes sense. You know, he's like justifying it. What the fuck?
we've already built that into the argument. No,
Right.
no, I'm sorry.
but he never said, remember.
Listen, let me explain to you where I'm coming from, okay? So that I think
allow me just to complete
we're
the
just
thought.
talking past each other.
No, we're not. Allow me to complete the thought.
Okay.
Okay.
If you read the Liberator article, editorial, he never says the U.S. government should have retaliated to Nat Turner.
Understood. Okay. So his argument is probably, you got to free the slaves, then none of this happens.
That's correct.
Fine. Let's accept that. However, do you honestly think that a leader of Israel is in a position after the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust to say, you know what we should do in reaction to this is free the Palestinians, whatever that looks like. This is never going to happen, right?
Correct.
And I'm interested in living in the real world, as I think you are. If you care about the lives of Palestinians and Israelis and everybody else, that means there has to be some kind of way of resolving this that is based in reality. And in reality, whatever way you look at it, you've got two tribes that absolutely hate each other with good reason for both sides to hate each other because there's been atrocity against both sides throughout history. You may argue about who's responsible and blah, blah, blah. Reality on the ground is this is where we are.
Yes.
So my question is, how should Israel have reacted in that situation in the real world? In the real world.
Right. And I think I have responded to you, but you can, of course, quarrel with me on that. And
I am quarreling with you.
As I said to, your name is?
Francis.
Francis. You can press me and press me and press me.
I'm trying.
Yes, and I will accept that. My answer is what I've said before. What in the real world should the Palestinians have done if they tried negotiations, they gestured to supporting either a two-state settlement, here I'm referring to Hamas, or what they called a hudna, a long-term ceasefire, when in March, beginning March 30th, 2018, they tried, not least because of my encouragement, they tried nonviolent civil resistance. And what was the Israeli response? We know exactly. There's a 250-page, single-spaced UN report describing the response. Israel took its best snipers, lined them up along the perimeter fence, And while there was this festive, to use the word of the UN report, atmosphere among the Palestinians, there was music, there was dancing, there was song. The snipers, I'm quoting the report, intentionally targeted children.
Bro quotes the UN like it's the Bible. Like, everybody knows the UN is anti-Israel bias. What probably happened, and I'm not familiar with this so-called atrocity, what probably happened is Palestinians rushed towards the border, tried to break over the fence, and tried to make some kind of terror attack, and then found out that's probably what happened. I'm only guessing.
Intentionally targeted medics, intentionally targeted journalists.
First of all, how do they even know if somebody intentionally targets somebody? Like what is the, like, Hamas live streamed it. Okay, fine. Did the IDF live stream that? Was there like video of them intentionally targeting these people? It's like it's no
Intentionally targeted disabled people. They described
now IDF soldiers are like, the guy's in a wheelchair, let's go after him specifically. Like everybody around, and then just go specifically for the disabled person. Like, you really expect us to believe that?
double amputees 300 meters from the perimeter fence that Israel shot. When they didn't kill them, they targeted them from the kneecap down to inflict, to use the technical term, life-changing injuries, which for the layperson translates as paralyze them. One Israeli sniper boasted to Haaretz newspaper, Israel's most serious newspaper, he shot.
Haaretz newspaper is by far the most anti-Semitic, anti-Israel newspaper in the world. It is where people like Candace Owens get their news. It is where people like Nick Fuentes get their news. It is exactly the opposite of a serious newspaper. It takes everything Jews and Israel and twists it to make the Jews and Israel look terrible.
42 kneecaps in one day. 42 children and adults paralyzed for life. And so when all the options of diplomacy, nonviolent civil resistance, when they've been exhausted, what were they supposed to do?
We've already accepted that. For the sake of this argument, I've said repeatedly, let's accept everything you're saying about the plight of the Palestinian people. None of what you're saying, though, is going to solve what's going on.
Yeah, well, to solve it, I would say you have to use the convention. By the way, just to clarify, even though in our conversation before the program began, I said I belong to the Marxist tradition. I see myself there. I'm not a radical on these subjects. If you can hear me through this whole conversation, I was just quoting international law.
I'm not suggesting you're radical.
So I have a very
Konstantin is like, I don't give a shit if you're a radical or not. Can you answer my goddamn question? All I'm asking you is very simply, after October 7th, what do you want Israel to do? No answer. No, he just doesn't give an answer for 20 minutes straight. Oh, look what happened to the Palestinians. Nobody asks that. He just wants to know, what do you want Israel to do? It just can't give him one single answer that's based in reality. This is the one question, guys. When you're ever in a debate, if you're ever in a debate with a pro-Palestine person, somebody that supports Hamas, for example, you just tell them, what do you want Israel to do? Realistically, what do you want Israel to do after October 7th? What in reality could the prime minister do after October 7th? There is zero good answers from that entire movement. Zero. For more, subscribe to our channel. If you want to help us make more of these videos, you can go to buymeacoffee.com patreon.com/JewishUncensored. You can also go to our channel memberships page and join there. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.